Going live, I guess, at this very moment. Looks like I probably am. Is there sound and picture, according to anybody who's there, hopefully? Hey, Brosmo, good to see you. You are the first one in here. Hey, Dano. Hey, Angelina. Good to see you guys. Thanks for being here. Actually, Jennifer will jump in a little bit later. She is, in fact, a dance instructor. And so she's got some extended lessons today that she's teaching. So she might be in a little bit later. Not sure exactly what her immediate schedule is, but thanks for being here. Sebastian Galliano, good to see you. Danny boy, hey, what's going on, you guys? Good to see all of you here. Um, I thought I would do something a little different just right off the bat. And if you don't want to participate or you feel uncomfortable answering these questions, this question, that's fine. No judgment here, of course. So I just really was kind of curious as to what the age range of everybody here is, because this is sort of an abstract venture. I always kind of assume that more or less people are going to be 40 plus, just because of my age and what you might have been interested in at times in your life, and what you're interested in now, what was influential as a teenager. And it says you're 42, Brasmo 51. So let's see. Danny Boy says, saw you live in Seattle when you all opened for White Zombie in 94. Yeah. Okay. I mean, the White Zombie stuff has its own kind of mythology at this point. And if you know the Tora little box set of 7-inch records that was made, there is actually, I think, a Seattle Arena announcement um, about that on there. Let's see, Sebastian says 42 in a week. Congratulations. And I hope you have a great birthday, and I hope things in your 40s are being awesome for you. Angelina, 26, turning 27 tomorrow. Hey, happy birthday. Have a really good one. And yeah, 27. Jesus. Wow. I remember 27. I was out of my mind. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Actually, what I was doing was I was kind of starting Alchemy Records in San Francisco around that time. So it's never too late to start a record company if you want to just kind of lose your mind. Have a lot of close personal crazy interactions with artists and otherwise. But happy birthday, Angelina. Vincent Priceless, 64. Okay, so you're right up there in the nether regions of life. Well, it's not quite the nether regions, but I'm 66. So I've still managed to retain somewhat of a sense of humor, trying not to hang on too much to regrets. Incidentally, I did a video once called Leave Regret Behind. I don't know if how many of you guys got to see that, but of course, I wish all of you the very best for the years ahead, and we'll see what um, that has in store for us. And also, I'm not sure how long I'm going to be doing YouTube for, but it seems like kind of a interesting, cool thing. And I will be, needless to say, spreading out in directions maybe a little bit beyond music. We'll just see how that transpires. And certainly, I'm coming to the end of what I can actually say about my time in the Melvins, or being associated with the Melvins, which lasted from 1986 until 1998. There's been a few wisps of interaction really in the last year. I'm not going to really say too much about that. There's no big plans or anything, but there is somewhat of a dialogue happening with them and, or at least Buzz. And there's a intuitively, there's somewhat of a good feeling about this, but, I have no expectations and I don't think he does either. So we'll just see what transpires and you guys will probably find out here. And thank you for watching the latest video about Honky. And oh, Brosmo says you saw Lori play on the Lysol tour at the Whiskey. Okay, so that was kind of starting to be right around the time when I was going into my front of house engineer phase with them. Um, I think Lori dropped out and then Joe Preston came in to do a tour. I was front of house engineer on that tour in the US. And then um, they went to Europe and did a tour, and I was front of house engineer on that tour, including the famous appearance at Reading Festival with Nirvana in '92, when one of the reviews about the Melvins' appearance was that they were possibly the worst band to ever play at Reading Festival. So I would consider that sort of thing a compliment, which I believe that they also did. And that was incidentally also the infamous um, Reading Festival where L7 threw us through Danita Sparks through a certain something at the crowd, which you can look up. I'm not going to give you a spoiler alert on that, but it's kind of a famous incident. I missed it, alas, because I was being part of the crew at the time. Just to quickly answer your question, Sebastian, um, I did not, we had quite the break. Um, we literally did not speak. Well, I still haven't spoken to Dale yet, but Buzz and I did not speak for probably at least 25 years. So, um, as I mentioned a little bit previously, we have had some communications, a little bit, some conversations, good phone conversations. So that's cool. You know, it's always nice to see um, how can I put it? Um, an evolution to way to certain things that you thought were, you know, kind of sealed in concrete. It just goes to show you that things are not necessarily sealed in concrete. But anyway, thanks for you guys sharing your ages, and it helps me to be a little bit more uh, sort of, what would the word be? Kind of pay a little bit of more attention to some of our younger listeners out there like Angelina, and just not assume that everybody knows everything. Um, so I'll try to be more mindful of that, although I try to get there. But obviously, if you ever have any questions at any time, if it feels like I'm missing something or making an assumption about something, I can always learn something myself. And one of the important things in life, of course, is to remember the further you go, the less you know. So that's what I've tried to live by. Always leave my mind open towards new things that I can learn. Um, Durf Nap, like the name. Durf Nap says 55. Don Joe Fonzarelli finally caught another live. Oh, hi, Mark. Hey, Don. We were just discussing our ages. This isn't going to go on for too much longer. And if it goes on for too much longer, well, this may turn into more of a memorial situation. That's all I'm saying. Let's see. Good interview with Tom Flynn that fills in some of the Melvin's history during the Boner era. Podcast called The Vinyl Guide. I'll have to check that out. And just related to that, I believe maybe next year is going to be the 40th anniversary of gluey porch treatments. And so, um, and I think a couple of years after, it'll be the 40th of Ozma. So there were some discussions with buzz just talking about those particular events and possibilities for those or whatever. So um, yeah, it's interesting and great to still talk about that stuff. And especially since it's been this long and those things have had the impact they have. Other people have come to it completely blind, made their own judgments about all of that stuff. So always good to hear interesting opinions that now have quite the context behind them, namely, a few decades of people being influenced by it, et cetera, et cetera. So, Danny boy, thank you for being interested in stories of my time in the Melvins. So, appreciate that. And of course, you're probably familiar with all the stuff I'm talking about right here on the channel. So let's see. Do you consider during one of these live streams for Q&A as fans of your career in music? I think that was one of my very early live streams, but it might be before that got on your radar. So I'm considering doing that again. Because obviously my music career goes back before Melvins and even before Alchemy Records, all the way back to kind of teenage years when there was a little bit of kind of goofy stuff happening there too. But I'm pretty straightforward, and there's basically nothing I won't talk about. I don't have anything to hide about all of this, and the stuff that is hidden, you'll just have to wait for the book. That's all I'm gonna say. So, Clown Alley, yes, yes. So, let's see. Sebastian says, after your previous 60s film streaming, I went and watched Dirty Dozen. I quite forgot Cassavetes was on it. He was awesome. Quite the film, too. I actually forgot to suggest Cassavetes also, who was co-starring in that movie. And that movie is just so packed full of just letter A 60s film stars. I think they were even trying to get Steve McQueen to be in it, which would have just been crazy. Um, but it is a great movie. And yes, Cassavetes is excellent. And I think that's when he was basically kind of going, well, if I do enough of these kind of movies, I can fund my own movies, which he ended up being able to do. But no, Danny, I'm not actually putting out a book. But um, there are consistently discussions about this sort of thing. Anyway, so let's see. You always wondered what the Clown Alley album cover was. Not sure what that means, but you can Google it. Oh, what it actually was. Well, it was a drawing by Victor Hayden, who was my partner in Alchemy Records. He also did the Neurosis Pain of Mine album cover, which I produced, and he also did Gluey Porch Treatment's cover. He didn't do the illustration, but he did um, kind of an enhancement of that drawing. The Clown Alley album is just an abstract thing that he came up with, kind of cubist in nature. I just asked him to throw some stuff at me, and he did, and we picked that one. But also, probably most famously, that's often another corner of the interweb and music history where I do not dwell. Victor Hayden was actually the cousin, first blood cousin of Don Van Vliet, otherwise known as Captain Beefheart. And if you take a look at the Captain Beefheart album, I think it's called Moonbeams and Blue Jeans, Victor Hayden did the cover for that also. So at the time, I was having the record label with Victor. He was very um, reticent about anybody finding out that he was um, the cousin of Don Van Vliet. And so I didn't really even find this out until basically, I think maybe just a year before he died, maybe a while back in the 2000s or something. So That was kind of amazing to me that he was, in fact, the mascara snake. That was his nickname. And if you get Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart, you'll actually see Victor Hayden listed in there. And there's also a photo of him in there. So, not to name drop, but that's who the guy was. And I actually did a video about Alchemy Records maybe a couple of years ago at this point. If you go into the playlists on my channel here and look for the Alchemy Records video, you'll get an hour, you'll get the entire history of Alchemy Records and just some of the strange coincidences that happened between Victor and I going all the way up into the 2000s, where he came to Austin for like a South by Southwest thing, showing his art. And the gallery he was showing the art at was in the building I was living in at the time, after not talking to him for 25 years or something. So, if you're interested in the history of that, definitely check that out. And Bongo Fury is a great record, Don Joe. And also, another weird coincidence that I had with the Captain Beefheart crossover thing, a very dear friend of mine, Cliff Martinez, who was the drummer in the Red Hot Chili Peppers for their first three albums, who subsequently became a pretty big, major, and important film composer, doing all the stuff for Soderbergh. He actually played on Captain Beefheart's last couple of records. So I managed to impress him by going, "Yeah, the Mascara Snake was my partner in the label," and he was going, "Whoa!" He found that incredibly impressive. So managing to impress him was a tall order, but somehow I managed to do it. Anyway, so we'll get on to the movies now, since I realize I've been blathering on for 15 minutes, and there may be a minor interruption where the love of my life comes in to make my day better, as she usually does. So let's see. Sebastian says, Cassavetes, one of my fave filmmakers, though his style can be challenging, let's say. Yeah, it can be. And he was really, um, this is a good place to kind of get into the films, because Cassavetes was a guy who I think I even had one or two Cassavetes films shown in a great film class I took when I was going to California Institute of the Arts in the late 70s. The guy who taught this class was a guy named Don Levy, and he actually was a film director. He made a crazy movie called Herodotus or Herostratus, and it's about a pay-per-view situation for a guy who wants to commit suicide. Either wants to commit suicide or he's going to be executed. So this is a crazy, challenging movie, virtually one of these large production avant-garde movies like El Topo or something in that range. And it also has an extremely young Helen Mirren in it. I think she might even be 20 or 19 or something. So if you can find this movie, Herostratus by Don Levy, check it out. But he had the name of his film class was an awesome title, and I still remember it to this day. And the title of the class was Film Now, semicolon, Sex, Violence, and Exponential Nirvana. That was the name of the class. And he showed a couple of Cassavetes movies in there. I can't remember which ones he showed. I think maybe Faces was one of them. Trying to think of what the other one was, possibly Husbands. But Cassavetes left me cold also, and I just had to I think he's one of those guys where you need to get enough life experience behind you where this stuff starts to resonate. It's literally, it is not for kids. even though it's a bunch of people just talking. And I think Cassavetes was really pretty profoundly influenced by Bergman because a lot of his movies are just headshots of people having these conversations about intense adult things. And they're not necessarily controversial subjects, divorce, abortion, whatever. Pick your, you know, controversial subject for the 60s. But I did have to get old enough. And I think the one that really cracked the ice for me was A Woman Under the Influence with the great Gina Rowlands, who was his wife also. But they just had this tag team thing going on, like a lot of great directors have with actors. And they'll use the same people over and over because there's an element of familiarity there. People like Kubrick did it, Hitchcock did it, people even like Roger Corman did it. I mean, they found these people who were kind of amazing. In the modern world, somebody like Euthanis is doing with somebody like Emma Stone. So these are great sort of creator muse situations. And Cassavetes is really, Husbands is one of my favorite films ever. And I kind of discovered this film when I was actually having a really difficult time in a previous marriage way back, like, really during Melvin's times and 30 years ago or so. And it was a film that was just kind of, you know, presented to me the possibility of there being other things. And I mean, it's not by any means, a film that you should use as an example. I mean, it's basically people on a whim are just going, what if we did this instead of this other thing? And just as all this other stuff happens. So that's the way that life is pretty much. You go through one door instead of another. And, you have a completely different result. And this is why you can't really regret specific things in your life, because if you go back and you change one thing, you actually change every single thing consequentially. You don't just change that individual thing. um oh, could you turn that off, please? Thanks. So the love of my life has actually walked in the door, so if you want to say hi, you can say hi. I don't know if she'll pop in to say hello or not, but yes, Peter Falk is Sebastian says Peter Falk's part in A Woman Under the Influence is great. Husbands is amazing. And Peter Falk, I only knew him from Columbo, really. So he was a great discovery for me. Of course, just later in his career, he was doing Wings of Desire with Wim Wenders, which is awesome. But Falk has such a great kind of delicate screen presence, and he is super awesome. Um, and for those of you who are not familiar with Cassavetes, Angelina, you might be a little young for Cassavetes at this point, but um, take a look. It might do something. If it doesn't, check back with Cassavetes in maybe 10 or 15 years once you've got a little more road behind you, as they say. So, um, okay, I actually am gonna. We're Amazingly, we're in part 4 of movies from the 60s. Um, Sebastian, no, I have not seen Fox drawings, but I'm going to make a note to check that out because he's one of my, yeah, opening night. Awesome. Yes. And A Woman Under the Influence, incredible. Yeah. So, I mean, you're obviously familiar with Cassavetes, and I mean, he's like Bergman. You can just pull any of them out, throw them in, or push the button. And yes, Joan Blondell, absolutely. I mean, these are great, great, legendary professional actors doing Broadway and just being being the best they can possibly be and just going, yeah, this is where I'm going to get huge close-ups of my face. And, they get to exhibit their craft to the best of their ability and they love it. And you can see everybody, you can feel the love that goes into all of those movies, just like Bergman, just like Fellini, any of the great filmmakers, really. So let me jump over to the rest of the list. You can see I had to add a bunch of stuff. And once again, it's one of these tangential things that goes on in my brain. One hits another thing, it hits another thing, it hits another thing. So actually, these are movies that I own, and I'd forgotten to put these in there because I just kept going, okay, that's enough, that's enough. So I'm going to go back a little bit to 1964 because I wanted to put in the movie Major Dundee, which is a Sam Peckinpah movie. And I can't believe I forgot this one because it's one of my favorites. And this is a great film. I don't know if any of you guys have seen Major Dundee, directed by Sam Peckinpah, but it's really his early big budget Western from 64. Like I said, I think it's got Strother Martin in it, L.Q. Jones, all of like talking about people that had a kind of crew that they like to use over and over again. Peckinpah definitely had his little crew, and he would haul them out and see if they were available. And if they were, bam, they were in the movie. So Major Dundee is awesome. It's got Charlton Heston, and this is a great film for Heston to get into in 1964. He's kind of getting out into an experimental land, and it's a pretty epic film, pretty maybe his biggest budget at this point. Obviously, it's got Heston in it. So it also has Richard Harris, and the premise is kind of like a Dirty Dozen, Magnificent Seven type of premise, except it takes place during the Civil War. And basically, if you know much about the Civil War was one of the most appalling wars ever fought anywhere. And I'm not getting into the politics of it. I'm not getting into who, why, where, what it is. Um, just on a side note, I will recommend the Shelby Foote History of the Civil War. Maybe it's like 3 volumes or something. He was the guy that the Ken Burns Civil War uh, PBS documentary was based on. And you can hear Shelby Foote speaking a lot in that. It's an invaluable history of the Civil War. And you can just, if you just watch that mini series of it, you'll know pretty much everything there is to know about it. And then if you really want to do the deep dive, you can read about it. But Major Dundee is based on during the Civil War in the South, particularly. The Yankees or the Union set up concentration camps. They weren't called concentration camps, they were called something like confinement camps. They had this specific name to them. Maybe they were just called camps, where they kept all of the members of the Confederacy that they captured. And of course, there were a lot of these after Sherman did his kind of run through the South, burning and pillaging. It was pretty much just a no quarter type situation. But the people who were left alive that were in the CSA were captured and they were put in these camps and they were treated just unbelievably bad. And one of the most notorious places was a place called Andersonville. And there's really a lot of books just written about Andersonville. And Andersonville was so notorious that after the war finally ended, I think some of the officers at Andersonville were actually tried for war crimes. So that's how seriously awful of a place it was. Um, but anyway, this movie, Major Dundee, kind of revolves around one of these kind of Confederate camps that the Union had, and they've got all these disgruntled um, captives there who used to be in the infantry of the Confederacy, and the commandant of the stockade is Charlton Heston, and the more or less the highest ranking officer of all the Confederate troops is Richard Harris. And basically what happens is there's a massacre by Native Americans on some homesteaders in the very beginning of the picture. And the nearest kind of cavalry or stockade is where this camp is. And so Charlton Heston basically has to get the worst of the worst, which is a bunch of these Confederate soldiers that are sentenced to be executed, to go and find who's responsible for these homestead massacres. So that's basically the entire movie. And it's great, just the kind of headbutting that goes on between Richard Harris and Charlton Heston, and just their whole journey trying to go and take care of this aspect. And also, the thing is terribly wrong, also, because the whole there is actually somewhat of a um, nod to grievances of the indigenous populations of the Americas at that point, which is great because they kind of go, well, this didn't happen in a vacuum. Nothing happens in a vacuum. There was a reason why this happened, but they kind of have to go about their business taking care of it anyway. So that's enough about Major Dundee. If you ever get a chance to see it, it's a big watch. It's maybe 2.5 hours. I think there's been the Blu-rays that are out are restored versions of it with some kind of restored footage and stuff. So I think that that has kind of made the rounds in some rep cinemas. So if you get a chance to see Major Dundee on a big screen, you should absolutely get down to see it. It's cool. It's in the Dirty Dozen, Magnificent Seven kind of realm of like the worst of the worst having to go after even more worse than they are. So, like Eagles Dare and Guns of Navarone and that type of thing. But highly entertaining and absolutely cool and worth watching. So the next one that I have that I won't go quite into depth with because it's kind of obvious in its nature, um, is going to be a movie from 1967, and that is the Maysles brothers documentary Don't Look Now. Not Don't Look Now, that's a different movie. Don't Look Back, which is a documentary that they made about Bob Dylan's tour of the UK and Scotland in 1965. And this is a famous tour where Bob Dylan went electric. So you had this really kind of potentially incendiary situation because you had an entire tour of people that couldn't wait to see Bob Dylan. This was the first time Bob Dylan was going to go and play in the UK and Scotland, I believe. If I'm wrong, somebody can correct me. I don't know how many of you people are Bob Dylan fans. On a side note, it took me a long time to get to Bob Dylan. And when I did, I just went, okay, it's, this is, he's kind of the alpha and omega of everything in modern popular music history. That's another discussion. So if you've seen like the movies where I think there's some movies that have been, there's one where 14 different people play Bob Dylan, and then there's another one, a more recent one that's kind of around the time of sometime in the 60s. I'm not sure if it covers anything from this tour in the UK, but this is great because Bob Dylan invented the existential crisis of the um, modern musician interview with a and just not behaving at all and talking to the press in a manner that's completely confounding them and making them feel confused and awkward. And the people who get it are just kind of asking real questions. And you can see him with his just laser like beaming in on those people who are being real. And so, anyway, on that tour, Bob Dylan, he brought members of the band who were not actually the band yet. And for half of his show, he had a drummer and a bass player and extra guitar players and a keyboard player. I think Al Cooper was playing on it, not Alice Cooper, to those of you who are younger. But this is the famous tour where at I think it was the Royal Albert Hall or some other concert where members of the audience were yelling Judas at him and booing him because he had a real band playing. And exactly, the band, not the band. It became the band later. I don't know what it means. What does this mean? So if you listen to the record live at the Albert Hall, which is not at the Albert Hall, and you can hear the audience yelling all kinds of stuff. They're going, "Get off," and "We hate you." And of course, this is, fairly familiar to me. I've heard some of that stuff in my days also. Never really got to be bad enough to hear Judas, but it was less inventive, let's say that. But anyway, this is really cool, and you get to see Bob Dylan sitting in a limousine with John Lennon being really, really nervous, and Bob Dylan kind of making fun of him, and really Bob Dylan just making fun of existence in general. There's so many great scenes in this. And at this point, because this is the early days of music, there's even a point where the crew and maybe the tour manager and a few guests are in a hotel or something, a nice hotel in London, and there's some complaints or something that happened. And somehow Dylan comes in and this thing's already been going on. And they come in and he comes in and he's just looking at everybody and he just goes, I mean, what are you doing? He just kind of goes, just brings them, they all are kind of going, literally, they're just mid drink going, uh, um, they're like 14-year-olds that got caught at their parents' house or something. And he's just going, I mean, come on, man, you know, you're being stupid, It's it's so great because I mean he's like 25 or something or 24. So it's just he just brings the whole thing all the way down. And everybody in the room is just going, oh shit, Bobby's bad, Bobby's bad, Bobby's bad. And or Bobby's mad. And there's just this glacial thing happening in the room. And then somebody completely just who you would never expect just starts playing a little song, and it's not Bob Dylan, and just takes the whole thing someplace else completely. But this is a really, really cool movie, and I'm gonna say it's probably in the top five uh music documentaries ever made. It's in the top three, really. I mean, it's just in the top three music documentaries ever made. And I'm saying that with my considerable experience and having watched a lot of music documentaries over the years. This is the real deal. It's great. Nobody knows what they're going to get when they walk into any particular door, and that includes the door of the Manchester Free Trade Hall or the Royal Albert Hall, or if one of the Beatles walks in, or and it's also this is music history. You're there, you're in the middle of it. So That's a great film, came out in 1967. I think there's also an additional, um, disc with a bunch of supplements that has extra material. Gimme Shelter, that's a good one too, and the older you get, the more insane that one looks also. And just the whole history behind that Altamont show and everything, and just the Rolling Stones as a thing at the time is its own beast. I love the Rolling Stones from that time, but the stories are just, they're unbelievable. They could never happen now, and they're just, once again, it's music history. So, and I do have a good little Keith Richards story that I might drop at some point. It's not me meeting him, but it's like a vicarious 1 degree of separation thing that's fairly humus, fairly fairly humus, fairly humorous. Let's see. Stop Making Sense are up there. Yeah, they are. That's right. Well, that's Jonathan Demme, right? Or yeah, it's Jonathan Demme, I think, that made that. Al Cooper's Autobio is a blast. It is. He's great. He's a monster. Okay, so next one is going to be Far from the Madding Crowd. Amazing John Schlesinger movie. He was the director. This movie's made in 1967. It has Julie Christie, Alan Bates, and Terrence Stamp, and it's based on a Thomas Hardy book. And if you like these big, incredible, beautiful, landscaped, big British movies with just the sun shining down in England like it's just so glorious, and period pieces, this is great. Um, Julie Christie is effectively a widowed, I think she's a widowed farmer's wife running a farm in the early 1820s or something like that, 1840s maybe. Um, Terence Stamp is the young roguish soldier who comes to town, and they have an affair. And then Alan Bates is the local shepherd who basically she always has to rely upon to kind of get her out of hot water. But this is a really, really um, amazingly beautiful film. Everything in it is shot incredibly. I'm wondering if even Nicholas Roeg was maybe the DP on this. It seems like maybe possibly he was, but everything, this is one of the greatest films of the 60s. It's up there with um, Dr. Zhivago and yeah, some of the other Julie Christie movies. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but Far from the Madding Crowd is great. And this is a movie you can really get lost in. There's not a moment of kind of cheese or schmaltz or where you just go, I wish they wouldn't have done that, or this is too loud, or that's dumb. There's not a moment like that. It's really quite amazing. And so that's a wonderful movie from 67. I think it's streaming. I have a Blu-ray of it. The Blu-ray looks outrageously good. It's been restored, looks incredible. This is one of those movies that needs a 4K release, absolutely. Um, okay, next, moving into 1968, incredibly, in part 4 here, we're finally getting to 1968. So first one I'm going to have for 1968 is Danger Diabolik, which is the great Mario Bava film with John Philip Law as the secret agent, super criminal type. We can't tell if what he's doing is good, what it's bad. He drives around in an XKE Jag, lives in the most amazing cave in the world. He's a scientist, biologist, acrobat, stunt driver, swimmer, who knows what else, and he's got a stunning Italian girlfriend, and that's all we need to know. I think the Beastie Boys had some kind of Danger Diabolic thing they made. Maybe they made a video that had something to do with Danger Diabolic. Do you know, Mrs.? Like some video where there's a guy with a mask on and he's driving in a car and it looks widescreen, and
Just
maybe some of you Beastie Boys fans will know. I'm not up on it, but yeah, I knew it was a parody. Yeah. Great Morricone score. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the great things about all of those Italian movies, because Morricone did, I mean, did he score every single movie in Italy between 55 and 75? I mean, it's crazy till he went to Hollywood and then scored every big movie there, right? So Danger Diabolic, great film, really fun watch. One of those, it's kind of in the sort of arena of those spy spoof movies, like the ones I was mentioning with James Coburn, In Like Flint, Our Man Flint. Um, yeah, excellent film. Love Danger Diabolic. I watched it maybe a couple of weeks ago, late at night. Really cool watch. Um, that's from 1968. Also 1968, Charge of the Light Brigade. I don't think I mentioned this one last time. Maybe you can clue me in if I did. I don't think I mentioned that one. Charge of the Light Brigade is awesome, based on the foolhardy stupidity of the British Empire in the 1840s, when they decided they wanted to go to war with Russia based on a rumor. And then every subsequent action that they did was completely stupid, all the way up until the actual charge of the Light Brigade. And that's a very famous thing. Longfellow wrote a poem about it. Um, and you get the entire background of it. It's got David Hemmings in it. It's got Vanessa Redgrave, directed by Tony Richardson. Another one of these great British period films. None of the women are wearing makeup in the film. I mean, they have some kind of makeup on, but it's very period authentic. They got all the uniforms and everything made to reflect the period, all the dresses, all the women wear. It's really jaw-dropping in its authenticity, especially if you've seen the previous one with Errol Flynn, which has its own charms. But this one is as realistic as it can possibly be, and it's based on a book called The Reason Why, that was written more or less contemporaneously at the time that the First and Second British War against the Russians was going on. So you have more or less a first or second hand account of the way that these officers came up through the army and how they were funded by people that had a lot of money, and they basically paid for the uniforms of their own particular brigade. The Light Brigade was one of those, much like what Blackwater does. They're kind of like an earlier version of that kind of thing. You've got these private armies, they're doing whatever they do, they're for hire, and they were for hire by the British military and intelligence at that point back then. So this is a great movie, and the score is good. It's not overdone. It's also got some great animation sequences in it that are allegorical, and they show the great British lion coming up to protect poor little Turkey and go to fight Russia. And the animation sequences are awesome. This is another one of those 2.35 movies. If you get a chance to see it in the movie theater, it's absolutely great to see. And I saw this movie in 1968 when it came out. So, on one of my many trips to the UK in the summertime. So, I was sitting there 9 years old watching this going, wow, okay, it was too labyrinthine, all of the plot machinations for me. But now as an adult, of course, I've gone right back and I've read histories about those particular wars, and it has resonance to this very day. And so it's interesting on that level, as well as quite a few other ones. Excellent, excellent film. Battle scenes are incredible. Everything's great. And it has, it's got David Hemmings in it as the young captain we follow through the ranks all the way to Sebastopol and the charge of the Light Brigade. It has Harry Andrews, it has Trevor Howard, and it has John Gielgud. So it's got and Vanessa Redgrave, as I mentioned, and David Hemmings. So awesome, stellar uh, British cast. Sebastian asks if I still enjoy movies. Did I still enjoy the movie at 9 years old? Well, like I just mentioned, yeah, I did. I mean, just as a spectacle. I mean, this is absolutely an adult film. I mean, this is for adults. This isn't, okay, we're throwing in a song sequence. Okay, we're now here's some humor to take the edge off of reality or whatever. It's just a straight dose of British history in the 1840s. And I would say it's one of the most authentic movies about that particular, it's definitely the most authentic movie made about that particular military episode, and probably the only person who could make one that would be, comparable would be somebody like maybe Christopher Nolan. It would have to be somebody on that sort of level, I think. Or possibly Danny Boyle, or who made 1914? Who made that movie? It could be like that person, the person who made 1914. So it's going to have to be somebody like that.
One shot movie.
Yeah, that was the one shot movie. Anyway, yes, some of the movies I saw at 9 years old, or between like 9 and 15. I mean, obviously, you're a kid, so the spectacle of the thing is making you go, "What's going on?" The minutia of what's happening in the Department of War between like Gielgud and Harry Andrews and Trevor Howard, you're kind of going, when's the next battle scene happening? So anyway, next is a film called Kuroneko, and this is a Japanese film, and it's about women who murder samurais and about ghostly things that happen. This is an awesome, excellent Japanese film and a really great companion piece to Onibaba that I recommended before. That would be a great and probably pretty devastating um, double feature to watch, but I would recommend that. So Kuroneko, check that one out. Once again, I'm going to put a list of all of these in here so you guys can copy the list and throw them onto your personal list if you want. I'm a little behind on my letterboxed list making over there, but you know, I'll get to it one day. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. To quote somebody I used to know. Let's see. Okay, this is a great 1968 movie also. It's incredible how all these sets of movies just came in packs all through the 60s. Um, but this is a John Borman movie. I think we had a little diversion towards John Borman with Zardoz in the past. And I'm still going to come back to Zardoz because, I mean, we always have to come back to Zardoz. We do, right? So this is a 1968 John Borman movie, Hell in the Pacific. Now, this is a great, great, almost Samuel Beckett style riff on World War II. We've got it's ticking many boxes of greatness. We've got an island, a desolate island in the Pacific. We've in the South Pacific. We've got World War II. We have, wait for it, Lee Marvin, and we have Toshiro Mifune. We have John Borman directing, and we've got Toshiro Mifune and Lee Marvin being the only two people in the entire movie because they are both crashed airmen who survived their plane crashes somehow. And it's in the, I think it's more or less in the waning days of World War II. They have no idea what's going on. They have no contact with the outside world. It's just the two of them on an island. And this is really a sign of the greatness to come of John Borman. This is not one of his movies that gets discussed a whole lot in his catalog because he does have some genuinely great films. I'm going to say this is one of the great films of the 1960s, one of the top 10. And this is another movie that was really hard to see for a long time. This movie, when it came out, I think it bombed. I haven't looked at the box office for it, but it's kind of in the vein of what was it called? The Naked Prey with Cornell Wilde, the one that I spoke about maybe a few things ago. But you guys got to, if you're a fan of this type of filmmaking, where there's not tremendous amounts of dialogue, but there's just these two protagonists, which is very Samuel Beckett like, and the whole movie is just what's going to happen with them, and we see them basically what they're doing by themselves and how they gradually get closer and closer together, what happens when they meet. And this is a really great film, and I heartily recommend it. Your life won't be complete until you watch Hell in the Pacific with these two guys. So, oh, Sebastian also says Morricone's The Thing score is mind blowing. Yes, it is. And it's also one of the very few, it's kind of Morricone does Carpenter in a weird way because he didn't really steer too far off, as he did with things like, gosh, what was the movie called with De Niro and Jeremy Irons? The Mission. So obviously Morricone had his orchestral chops down unbelievably, but the score for The Thing is great. I mean, I love that you can't imagine anything else being in there, and you can't imagine anybody better than Morricone to just imitate, unless it would be some kind of Japanese composers or whatever. Um, so, okay, Hell in the Pacific, 1968. Also in 1968, well, and the 68 is a monster year. Um, Also in 68, Rosemary's Baby. So, speaking of Cassavetes, I'm probably pretty sure everybody here has seen Rosemary's Baby. Um, Another one of those ones that basically ended up on VHS, possibly panned and scanned. Really the one that put Polanski on the map. And of course, just, I know quite a bit about the making of this film and all this kind of stuff. But one of the things I didn't realize was that um, uh, Sharon Tate was actually on set for some of the shooting of this film, which kind of gives it like more of a resonance. I actually saw some photos of her just sort of hanging out. And of course, we all know what happened to her pretty much right after the making of this. Um, so that was just kind of like okay, here's a reminder of stuff that goes on in the real world. And of course, I mean, there's not I'm not one of these people who think that, the Manson thing was cool in any kind of way. Um, and I do have a Manson story also with like a 1 degree of separation thing that I might share at some point, which is chilling and awful and kind of just this more like the stuff that goes on with all this kind of stuff. So, what can we say about Rosemary's Baby? I put up the thumbnail last week of her going, but this is also actually, apart from it being a film that is genuinely chilling and has kind of a Kafka-esque nature to it, where Rosemary's running around just feeling insane because nobody believes her. This is also very Kafka-esque and Beckett-like, where you get your own reality, we've got our reality, and never the two shall meet. And really, I've been in points like this in my own life where I've just been going, I mean, that's the great line from Bohemian Rhapsody, right? Is this the real world? Is this, is this reality or is this just fantasy? What is it? Nobody knows. And in Rosemary's Baby, nobody really, they kind of keep it going for a long time as to whether or not she's we get a little bit of her, POV, as they say, but at the same time, it's, is this happening? We don't really know. And I think there's even a point where maybe after she has the chocolate mouse, where she falls asleep and then wakes up and is going, this isn't a dream, this is really happening. But you still are not sure if she's in a dream thinking that, dreaming that it's something that's happening. It's a highly complex film, really, and has a lot of dark humor in it. It really has a lot of black humor, and it still does, considering the background of the film and everything. And it's not a film that I revisit a lot, but I think the Ruth Gordon character and her husband, forget the name of the actor, they're just great, and they're like they're like comedy tag team, really, right up until the point where they're not, and then they're just, now we're evil. How do you like us now? So it's a pretty amazing watch, and this is one of those ones that I saw as a teenager, and I was going, it's pretty scary, but Mark of the Devil was weirder and more messed up. Um, but as an adult, once again, there's once you have enough living experience in you, and of course, these are all adults making these movies, so they know what they're doing, and they are digging the depths, and they're pulling stuff out for our benefit. So that's great. That's why these movies still stand up, and they can be looked at forever. And as long as the human experience is there to be perceived, it will be. Um, let's see, Don Joe Fonzarelli. Incontro is a really nice score by Morricone. There's more music on the soundtrack than in the film. Yeah, this happened to a lot of movies. There'd be kind of, and typically they were just doing that because they didn't want to end up with, um, like 85 minutes worth of music in a 90-minute movie, which is what they do now. Jennifer and I were watching this something the other night, and it was just, yeah, I think it was the first part of Horizon, this new Kevin Costner thing. And I was thinking, I actually like some of the stuff in this, but then it was wall to wall music and never stopped. And I kept thinking, this would just be better if they just started singing, because then I could go, okay, now we're in like a Jacques Demy film, or we're in Dancer in the Dark, which had singing also. So anyway, I'm leaving it. Um, yeah, Rosemary's Baby. Can't say more about it. Also in 1968, Witchfinder General. So I believe this is the only film that was made by Michael Reeves, who is the director of this, and it has Vincent Price in it. And we all think of Vincent Price as kind of, you know, hammy, which he could do, but also he was, profoundly great. I just watched him in a Fritz Lang Fritz Lang film called Blue Gardenia, and he was chilling and, really just oily is the only way I can describe him in that as a newspaper man. And then obviously Vincent Price's great sci-fi films in the 50s, The Fly, in the 60s. I think he's also in the Ten Commandments in the 50s. And then in the 60s, he's in those great Roger Corman movies. And those do have a certain amount of theatricality to them, shall we say. But Vincent Price he's never serious to the point, he never makes fun of the roles that he's in. He always plays brilliantly and to the point. All those films like The Haunted Palace and Fall of the House of Usher, Mask of the Red Death. He's always just tales of terror. He's right there, right in the moment. And you can see the really just the joy of every other actor that gets to work with him. So this film, Witchfinder General, it's also a British film, and I believe it was renamed The Conqueror Worm for distribution in the United States. One of the great things about this film is it has early title sequence by Terry Gilliam, who did all those great animations for Monty Python, and of course went on to make really fabulous movies in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. He's still, I'm not sure what he's working on now. And of course, there's the great um, documentary about him trying to make a film about Don Quixote. But he did a great title sequence for this film, Witchfinder General. And you could just, that's probably on YouTube, I would imagine. Witchfinder General is another one of these films that was impossible to see a good version of from basically 1968 until literally a few years ago. That's how long it took to basically go, okay, we have the ability to do this now. Let's make a 2 or 4K scan of it. Let's do it properly in the original camera negative. And if you've always thought of Vincent Price as I was saying, kind of hammy or jokey or whatever, watch this film, and Vincent Price does a portrayal of one of the most loathsome individuals ever in all of film, really. And the person he plays was based on a real person called Matthew Hopkins. I think maybe originally the title might have even been called Matthew Hopkins, Witchfinder General. But this is back more or less in the time of I think the British Civil Wars is more or less around the time it was taking place. And this is based on real fact when there were magistrates who would go around the UK and Scotland and Ireland, I think even, basically just investigating complaints of witchery and sorcery. And they would just go and just capture whoever was being accused of being a witch on behalf of whoever was in power. And then they would just effectively torture them to death and then murder them or execute them, all in the name of the church and the government. And Vincent Price's portrayal in this film is completely chilling and will basically redial your brain about the capabilities of Vincent Price. And it's really, really a great film. I don't watch it that often because it's a film that lingers. in kind of the worst sorts of ways. I think this film got a number of reissues over the years theatrically because I seem to remember it coming to maybe El Paso when I was a teenager or something, but for some reason I couldn't get to it. But this is a fantastic film. And I think maybe it's the only film that this director made. I think possibly he even committed suicide after making this film. So that's puts another little kind of twist on it also. He might have just died. My memory's a little sketchy on this from an illness, but I seem to remember maybe he, yeah, I think maybe he committed suicide as a result of it, but it might be, I don't know. Anyway, unusual, crazy film, really well done. Um, and yeah, okay, next in 1968, and this is a really a fitting film to end 1968 with, which is 2001: A Space Odyssey. And this is another one of those films where I don't even know what to say about it. I've got a book called The Making of 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was a paperback that came out in the 70s. It's this thick, and half of it is just technical stuff. So if any of you are a fan of this film, which you have to be, I mean, who's not a fan of 2001? Check out that book, and it might be in a library, possibly. Might be able to find it on eBay. I think it might have become a little bit collectible at this point, but a really great behind the scenes look at some of the engineering, how the screenplay was assembled, Kubrick's method, getting the actors, just the entire thing, getting the producers online to make it. Um, that's really a great source, the making of book. And then, of course, there's the Tash and Stanley Kubrick archive book, which is also an incredible resource for that. I think there's a smaller version of it now, but the version that I have, I got immediately when I saw it was announced, and it turned out to be the big giant version that has a still from Stanley Kubrick's personal copy of 2001: A Space Odyssey in it. So it's got an actual film. Yeah, it's up there. I'm not going to pull it down. But those are out there still too. But if you like Kubrick, the Tash and Kubrick book is outrageously good. They should do one for Kurosawa. I think they did one for Bergman. I don't have that one. And then they should do one for Fellini. And there's a couple of probably Hitchcock. I don't know. Taschen books are great. They're well worth the investment. You learn incredible amounts from them. They're done really well, usually with coordination with the archives of these filmmakers. So I recommend the Kubrick one if you guys are particular fans of him. And there's tons of those copies out there. So, and 2001 is a movie that I saw as a 12-year-old or whatever, 13-year-old, once again sat there going, I have no idea what this means. I still don't, nobody still knows what it means. I think I read an interview with Christopher Nolan where I think he had something to do with a recent restoration of it, but he said that this is the most important film in history, basically ever made. So that's Nolan saying that. So I like some of his stuff, but he knows his stuff. You can't argue with that. And yeah, if 2001 shows up in rep at a big movie theater and you haven't seen it, get the down there immediately because this is you. There's not a screen big enough for this film, and it's spectacular and mysterious and really on a mythical exists in a mythical space but I mean, that's really all I can say about it. So wonderful film. Love it. We'll just, if I ever get a chance to see it on the big screen, I'll get right down there. Um, so that closes out 68. Now into 1969. First film I have for that is the film Medea, which is directed by Pier Paolo Pasolini. And I mentioned a film of his in the 60s, which was Teorema. And that was a film with Terrence Stamp where he shows up at the house of a very bourgeois family in Milan, and they all fall in love with him. And it gets really weird. Uh, so this is the second film of his that's going to come up in here, and it has the great Maria Callas, one of my favorite sopranos ever, one of the legends of opera. And I could probably talk about opera forever, but I would spare you. I'm going to spare you. Yep, Teorema, there it is. So this is her one and only film experience, film role, excuse me. And at this point, I think she had retired from the stage, but she was still giving master classes, I think. I don't think she sang in public again, maybe after the mid 60s. She did a few recitals or whatever. Um, but she is awesome in this film, and you get a sense of her magnetic personality. And this is based on the myth of Medea. And if you know things about Callas's private life, how she was married to, she basically got married or had a big relationship with Onassis, kind of left her existing life at the time to have a relationship with Aristotle Onassis. And then he said, okay, bye. I'm going to do this Jackie Kennedy thing now. You just on your merry way. So her later life was filled with a kind of, um, just despairing heartbreak that probably contributed to her early death, which is entirely unfortunate. But um, Maria Callas was one of the sopranos that directly influenced me getting interested in opera, and I remain to this day an opera fan. I came to opera very late in my mid 30s, and it's a beautiful thing. So, yes, Pasolini, Morricone, absolutely. And this is a really cool film, also in the realm of the mythological, with Medea playing, with Callas playing Medea. And it's got lots of crazy stuff. You can see in the thumbnail that I put the centaur in it. Um, so if you're in the mood for some kind of trippy sort of stuff, because the 60s, mid 60s to later 60s, things start to get trippy. Filmmakers, producers, writers, cinematographers, directors, actors are starting to get influenced by certain substances that are drifting around, still legal. And they're also bringing that to explore the subconscious. And that is correct. It's LSD, and the history of LSD is a wonderful, interesting history by itself, filled with just kind of terrible wrong turns. And hopefully there's a little bit of a right turn with some of these psychoactric substances happening now. And that would be for the benefit of mankind. You can only help but wonder why these materials appear at certain points. So, yeah, acid, we could do a thing on it. It could happen. Um, so that was Medea, was the first one in 1969. Now hopping to the other end of the spectrum, which is no less mystical and strange and kind of Kafka-esque and also like a Samuel Beckett thing is the movie Easy Rider. And Easy Rider has some great behind the scenes tales to it and great stories involved in the making of it, and the whole counterculture revolving around Easy Rider is just a beautiful thing to read about with people like Dennis Hopper and the Monkees and Peter Fonda. And incidentally, if you know about the Monkees and that whole thing, I'm talking about the AirSats band that was invented to kind of um, be sort of like somewhat of a rivalry to the Beatles at the time was the Monkees, and they had a TV show and they made a movie, and the movie Head was a big success because the Monkees TV show was a big success, and one of the producers of Head, I believe, was Peter Fonda. And so the money that Peter Fonda made, he directly just shoveled into making Easy Rider with Dennis Hoffman. I mean, with Dennis Hopper. So Dennis Hopper was rooting around looking for some money for it. And he and Peter Fonda just kind of hooked up and, told Dennis Hopper, said, here's what I'm thinking about. And Peter Fonda just said, well, here's the money. Let's go do it. So, so that's really cool. And of course, it's got Nicholson in it. And what a beautiful film. I mean, Easy Rider is a great, great tribute to just Americanism. That whole thing, just we're going to drop everything, man, and we're just going to go that way. It's so um, just American and very just righteous and really cool. And a lot of people haven't actually maybe watched it all the way through in the movie theater or whatever. This is another one that was kind of hard to see when it finally did get on TV. It was chopped to hell and highly edited, pan and scanned, whatever. And yeah, it's if you've never watched it all the way through, it's just a great existential thing. And actually, a couple of times when my friend Greg Anderson and son was in town, maybe like 5 years ago or something like that, there was a screening of a restored version of it, and he had an extra day in town, took an extra day to hang out, and he was kind of going, "Hey, man, what's if we ought to hit a movie or whatever?" And I took a look at what was on, and Easy Rider was on. So I said, "Hey, have you ever seen Easy Rider?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's been a while, whatever." And I said, "Oh, let's go see it. There's a restored version of it." So we went to see it, and at the end of the movie, he sat there and he went, "Is that it?" And I go, "Yeah, that's it." And he was like, "What? That's crazy." He never realized that that actually was the end of the movie. So I'm not gonna tell you the end of the movie or whatever, but there's a lot of great mythology surrounding that movie, and the Dennis Hopper thing in it. Dennis Hopper is pretty much basing that character on David Crosby, and David Crosby, of course, was a character in his own right. And there's just amazing. If you want to read a really insane music autobiography, read Long Time Gone by David Crosby. I mean, David Crosby, he's kind of okay. He was the guy with the sweet angelic voice in Crosby, Stills and Nash, and was kind of a hippie dude. And, yeah, got in trouble with some law, went to prison for a while, et cetera, et cetera. But just read Long Time Gone by David Crosby, and it will just, you just can't believe the stuff that this guy's into. I mean, he's just he's so outlaw. I mean, he's just quintessential. The law does not apply to me, and is living it, you know, and he's in a situation where mainly the law really does kind of not apply to him. He's operating in a particular milieu in Hollywood and music, and he was virtually untouchable up to a point. He had a great run, and the stories are amazing in his biography. And just to close out David Crosby, if you don't know his, any of you who are familiar with him are probably going to be familiar with him because of Crosby, Stills and Nash, which is that's an amazing thing by itself. But he put out a really incredible album in maybe 69 or 70. It's got all these amazing people on it, but the album is called If I Only Could Remember My Name. So for those of us who have had existential issues or just seen the world in a macro, from a macro viewpoint, from a micro viewpoint, from all different kinds of angles, this is a beautiful record. The sounds on it are wonderful. It's filled with guest stars. It's mainly just kind of jams, but it really captures a very particular moment. And this is an album that's ageless. It's beautiful sounding. So I'm going to recommend David Crosby's album, If Only I Could Remember My Name, and also his autobiography, Long Time Gone. Those are both great things. And that's the end of talking about Easy Rider, which is,
Stop going to the graveyard of Dennis.
oh yeah, okay, more Dennis Hopper. One of the things that we do we've been doing when we go to Taos is go to Taos, New Mexico, is we go to Dennis Hopper's burial site. He's buried there. He lived up there for years and years. Actually owned a place that used to belong to a woman called Mabel Dodge. It's called the Mabel Dodge House, and you can go and stay at this house. It's a hotel now. No Wi-Fi in the rooms. It abuts sacred Navajo land, and this is a great place to go. And so, once again, I mean, obviously, we could do a whole thing about Hopper, whole thing about just the cross sectionality between him and a whole variety of old Hollywood, new Hollywood, future Hollywood. Um, that's a whole other story. So yeah, Easy Rider. And if you're ever in Taos, New Mexico, you can go and say hi to Dennis and stay in his former home, which is amazing. Also in 1969, The Damned by Luchino Visconti. I mentioned his film The Leopard previously, which had Burt Lancaster in it. This is a awesome film, basically set right around the time when Hitler is coming to power. It's set right around the time of the Night of the Long Knives. If any of you know about that, that's when Hitler consolidated his power by basically getting rid of the SA, which was more or less his private army. And the reason he did that is because he had bigger fish to fry, and it was more or less a contingency so that the army would swear allegiance to him. And that's what happened. And that's kind of a footnote. It's sort of the background, this kind of ascension to absolute power, but done on the sly by Hitler. There's nobody playing Hitler in this movie. This is primarily about um, a German industrialist, a huge German steel industry, more or less modeled on Krupp, the Krupp Steel Works. And it has Dirk Bogart, and it's also got the great Charlotte Rampling in it. And everything in this is just spectacular. This is another one of these films that was just on terrible quality for years and years, terrible pan and scan VHSs, terribly served on DVD. There's a great reissue of this on Criterion, a beautiful remaster, so you can see all of the exquisite details on this. It deals primarily with the family that wants to retain control of this particular steelworks in the time of 1933 when Hitler is coming to power, and the kind of factions that are competing with each other for power of this steel company, some that are getting aligned with uh, the National Socialists coming to power, others that are wanting things to stay the way they are. And this is a fantastic film about the machinations of all of that kind of stuff happening. If you like Visconti, this is essential Visconti and just magnificent filmmaking. I mean, he's one of the great filmmakers ever, one of the top three Italian filmmakers. Um, Next, in 1969, The Color of Pomegranates. This is a great Armenian film that has a lot of folkish and um, kind of mythical elements to it also. You can see this film pointing the way towards Jodorowsky and who else would it be pointing the way to? Some of the more experimental filmmakers of the 70s. Um, Antonioni certainly, I think, was influenced by The Color of Pomegranates. A lot of people were. Certainly Werner Herzog, I would imagine, who was just kind of starting to make films around this time, early 70s, really. But if you haven't seen The Color of Pomegranates, beautiful film. You can watch it again and again, never gets old. Outrageously good. Let's see. The Visitor. Yes, The Visitor is a great one. John Huston. I mean, he was up for anything. I think he was even in a Planet of the Apes movie, right? A little bit later. Let's see. Nicholson's part in Easy Rider is great. Yeah, he is. I mean, he's just, it's all there. You just look at him and you go, this is great. And I think that maybe one of the next movies he'd be making would be maybe Five Easy Pieces or The Last Detail. Nicholson's just getting started. I mean, and he's awesome, obviously. Let's see. Sebastian says the ending of Easy Rider. Yep. Yeah, yeah, it's a thing. And Tony Basil. Yep, that's right. Let's see.
Someone-
Yes. Yeah, she must have been 20 or something. It's crazy. Five Easy Pieces is good. Yeah. King of Marvin Gardens. All that era of Nicholson is awesome. I mean, Nicholson's always good. Yeah, pretty much, right? But you got to make a living, even if you're Jack Nicholson. Um, okay, 1969, The Magic Christian. And this is a great one of these wacky 60s movies, a British movie. Fantastic score by the British band Badfinger, who is just, on a diversionary note, if you want to just see if you want to just see the possibility of things that can go awry in a band, just pull up the Wikipedia bio of Badfinger and breeze through it because it's just epically catastrophic. You just can't believe it. Um, and talk about a great, just every possible mistake being made and um, every kind of opportunity just be having the wrong decision made, being squandered, being taken advantage of, um, especially if you're a fan of their music. And I think they kind of collaborated with Paul McCartney on the soundtrack to The Magic Christian. and obviously the great song, If You Want It, Here It Is, Come and Get It, the song written by Paul McCartney. And yeah, Badfinger, excellent. And it's this movie, The Magic Christian, has Peter Sellers in it as the richest man in the world. And just let's say that this richest man in the world, Sir Guy Grand, is profoundly more interesting than Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. I mean, these guys, they could only wish to get even 2% of the coolness of Peter Sellers playing the richest man in the world. Oh, incidentally, Sebastian says, funny how they got recognition recently thanks to Baby Blue. Yeah, well, I mean, that just shows how timeless and legendary their songs are. I remember Baby Blue when it was in the top 10. So in the late 60s, early 70s, it was a song that hung on, just like the song If You Want It, Here It Is. So those songs were great. I mean, they're Paul McCartney songs effectively. I think Baby Blue is more of a straight up Badfinger song. But yeah, I mean, talk about a perfect, you can't imagine the end of that without that song now. I mean, it's just like some points in Mad Men, the great TV show also, their use of music was absolutely great. Without You, yeah, I mean, Nielsen is another guy who's in that sort of Beatles circle. And there's the Nielsen thing is a sad thing too. And yeah, if you watch that great Nielsen documentary, I mean, he's basically the only man who was killed by Beatles. Yeah, that's at the end of it. That's what I said. I said, well, okay, there was a guy who was actually killed by Beatles. So the effect the Beatles had on him, not, of course, the Beatles were great and it was a thing, but yeah, uh, Magic Christian's great. The title, The Magic Christian, is actually a Terry Southern book, who also wrote a couple of other crazy psychedelic books in the 60s. And Ringo Starr is a homeless guy. And um, while Peter Sellers is also the richest man in the world, he's the most bored man in the world. So walking out in the park one day, he sees um, Ringo Starr asleep on the grass or something and wakes him up and says, "Oh, what are you doing?" They have kind of a crazy conversation. And Sir Guy Grand doesn't have a son at this point. So he says, "Are you up for it? What do you think? I think you'd be a reasonably good son." And I forget the name that Ringo Starr has in it, but he says, "Sure, let's try this out." And so they spend, Sir Guy Grand just kind of follows, Ringo just follows Sir Guy Grand around, throwing in a wry line every once in a while Sir Guy Grand just goes about paying off, seeing what he can get everybody to do in the world for money, for money. And this involves all kinds of stuff. And they start putting a lot of signs on things around London that say, "Getting it ready." And they don't explain what they're getting ready or why they're doing it. And there's this big to do made about having the signs gotten ready to say, "Getting it ready." So this is the kind of level the film relies on. And there's just a myriad of amazing cameos. I'm not going to tell you what the cameos are. Um, Actually, curiously, Polanski, he's one guy I'm going to tell you, shows up in a cameo, a really great cameo. And also, of course, Polanski is in Easy Rider in the very beginning. He's the guy who kind of does the deal, shows up in a Rolls Royce, Peter Fonda hops in the back of the Rolls Royce. They do the deal, and yeah, so Polanski makes himself known in The Magic Christian. And if you guys haven't seen this, it's on Blu-ray now. Great uh, restoration available now. Um, yes, the scene with Ringo and the gun on the bus. There's all kinds of great scenes in this, and of course, you have to be older to kind of go, yeah, okay, I get this now. But Magic Christian, and we're at the very end, and I'm probably saving my favorite movie of the 1960s for the very end, which came out in 1969. And that movie is The Wild Bunch. And The Wild Bunch, I remember when it came out in 69 or 70, and I really wanted to go and see it. And my parents said, it's an R-rated film. You're not going to see it. That was the end of it. There wasn't a conversation about how, well, if you're under 18, you can get into it with your parents. My parents were just, we're not watching that. That's a cowboy movie. Although I do seem to remember seeing um, some of the Sergio Leone movies, but The Wild Bunch is next level Western. And really there, Sam Peckinpah is kind of going, I would imagine that this is the kind of thing that influenced Cormac McCarthy in Blood Meridian, or some of the other things that he's written about, because this was really the first kind of really, really rough graphic Western to hit the movies. And when it came out, and I read about this later, because there's a great, if you want to read some really fantastic, legit, real film criticism back when people were film critics for a living, there was a great film critic at the New York Times. Her name was Pauline Kael, and she was kind of a notorious critic because she could more or less make or break your film. I mean, she would basically review Bergman films and kind of throw in some hints for him. I mean, she was really ballsy on that level. But I think one of her reviews about The Wild Bunch, she might have written a couple, kind of written a review and then went back and said, okay, I need to revisit this or something. But she just said that this was an outrageous film, and that there were reports of women fainting during the screening of this film initially because of the violence in it. And people just becoming physically ill because of the level of violence in this film. And really, this was the film that kind of blasted open the violence door. I mean, the opening scene, the first 25 minutes of this movie are just, they're just kind of like, it's up here about what it's doing. And it's also really kind of an interesting commentary just on, I mean, obviously Peckinpah is extremely intelligent person, extremely intelligent person. All the people making the film, everybody knows what's going on at the time when they're shooting this film in 60, 68, I think, which is the Vietnam War. So I even remember this from the late 60s, early 70s. Uh, Basically, the war wasn't on all day like it is on cable TV or on, streaming stuff like YouTube, where the war is on all day and it's just, oh, the war's on. Okay. The whatever's on, and it's just on, and we're kind of, yeah, okay, this other stuff's on too. But the war was limited to being on during supper time. So, I'm sure that there were probably millions of homes. And basically, it was just actually our kitchen was separate from where our watching TV area was. Watching TV was in the den, kitchen was in another room, but the TV would get put on. Sometimes it wouldn't get put on, but it would get put on. And in the background, you could just hear, 75 people wounded today, 135 killed. And so that was supper time viewing. And as a child, I didn't understand. I mean, I've read quite a bit about the Vietnam War now. I know an awful lot about it, too much, probably. And this is another one of those things where we have to be grateful for Ken Burns for supplying an outstanding documentary on the Vietnam War. If you don't know anything about it, and it's just kind of fuzzy and gray and hanging around in the background, it's really enlightening as to where we are now with a lot of stuff happening. And you also get um, exactly a very, very erudite description from people who were there and also from government officials and people who were, by the time it was made, I think it was up in the 2000s. So you've got people who are willing to talk about it. And a great thing about it also is you've got a tremendous amount of input from people who fought on the side of North Vietnamese, people who fought on the side of the South Vietnamese. And incidentally, the North Vietnamese did not call it the Vietnamese War. They called it the American War. So that should tell you something right there. But anyway, all this stuff's floating around in the background. And so, and I've read some quite a bit of analysis and criticism about the Wild Bunch in particular and how Sam Peckinpah was just going, okay, I'm just going to spit a little bit of this back at you, passive entertainment seeking people, and just, get a belly full of it because you know, this is what's happening for real out there. And it's still kind of true to this day, really. I mean, with all the kind of issues going on with censorship, what you can show, what you can't show, what you can talk about, what you can talk about. Uh, horrible stuff is happening in the world, and this kind of thing where critics or the more sensorial amongst mainstream media are going to go, you can't show that. That's outrageous. Um, it's really a strange thing when reality somehow can't be shown, but then fictional nature of violence is considered something outrageous that can't be watched. And we're even seeing this up to um, the present day. I'm not going to go off on too much of a tangent here, but uh, as recently as just 4 or 5 years ago, Lars von Trier took a film to Cannes Film Festival, and that film was, I think, The House That Jack Built. I haven't watched that film. I probably won't watch that film because I know what it's about, and I just don't want to put it in my brain. But um, critics at the time that attended screenings of it just ran out of it and said, we have to ban this. We have to ban this. This is, you're an outrageous person and we should have never let you come back to Cannes, et cetera, et cetera. And he just kind of laughed at him and said, it's not real. It's just, this is pretend. We're just making this stuff up. When we're making this stuff, people are laughing. They're having a good time creating this, even though the subject matter is not for everybody. So his point was actually just well and true that everybody's all prepared to get bent out of shape about fictitious things, and there are some really heinous fictitious things out there. But reality, we just have to put it someplace where nobody can see it. Anyway, back to the Wild Bunch. If you don't know the Wild Bunch, This is another big screen movie you have to watch. It's absolutely amazing. It's got Robert Ryan, um, Ernest Borgnine. Um, it's got Warren Oates, and who else is in it? Oh, you know what? Almost forgot. I've got this right here. I'm going to tell you about this. So, okay, William Holden, Ernest Borgnine, Robert Ryan, Edmund O'Brien, man from yeah, Edmund O'Brien, Warren Oates, Jaime Sanchez, and Ben Johnson, the great John Ford rider and world champion cowboy. So this is awesome. Obviously, I have this right here, and inside it, I have the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray's got issues with it. We can only, and they've passed the 50th anniversary. So this is a movie that needs to be on Blu-ray. Anyway, this is my favorite movie from the 1960s with 2001, probably number two. Anyway, a personal interaction here related to the Wild Bunch, which thrilled me no end. I don't know if you guys have seen the Wild Bunch. Deftones official. Yeah, Mark in the Flesh on stream. Are you actually from the Deftones? Are you a guy from the Deftones? Because I love your band. I've always loved your band. And that would be awesome. And just quickly, since we're in Filmland, I need to produce your band. Your band is waiting for me. And check out some of the other stuff I've produced. Maybe let's do something. Drop me a note through my website, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Great to see you. Love the Deftones. Sebastian says, I understand Sam Peckinpah's relationship with the critics was awful. Yeah, I mean, and producers and DPs and pretty much everybody. There's some great extras for Osterman Weekend, which is his last movie. And there's some things with actors talking about him 20 years after the fact. So those are cool. Okay, so this was my DVD copy of The Wild Bunch, as I mentioned. I do have a Blu-ray inside. But when I was living in El Paso, Texas in 2002 or three, after I moved there after living in London, they would have these kind of cool cultural events. People would come up from Mexico or they'd come in. They'd have them at a place called the Chamizal in El Paso. It was like a theater. And they were doing a screening of the film like Water for Chocolate. This film is directed by the great Mexican filmmaker and actor Alfonso Arau, and that's the direct relation here. So I knew who Alfonso Arau was, and I'd seen Water for Chocolate already, but I was writing for a publication in El Paso at the time, and this is a whole other thing I could talk about, but Beto O'Rourke, former congressman for Texas, had a newspaper at this time in El Paso, had like a kind of Austin Chronicle, LA Weekly type of paper that he made called Stanton Street Weekly. And Beto and I had some mutual acquaintances. Actually, his ex-girlfriend was a really good friend of mine. So it's like a small kind of social circle in El Paso. I ended up writing movie reviews for Beto for his paper and music reviews also. I'll probably talk about some of those at some point, do a show about them. But one of the things that came up for me to cover and maybe write an article about for the weekly was Alfonso Arau coming to do like a, maybe it was even like a 15th anniversary showing of Water for Chocolate, maybe. And he was going to speak at it. I'm not sure if he was living in LA or still living in Mexico at the time. But anyway, he, the editor said, hey, Mark, They're doing an anniversary showing of like Water for Chocolate. Alfonso Arau is going to be there. How'd you like to go down and write a little piece about it or whatever? And I kind of went, Alfonso Arau, really? Okay, yeah, 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 I need to go down there and write about Water for Chocolate. But he has a pivotal and amazing role in the Wild Bunch. And Peckinpah obviously was a huge John Huston fan. There is a scene, if you know his films, there's always like moments where you go, "Ah, okay, there's the John Huston homage or whoever." Um, but so Alfonso Arau, if you've seen the Wild Bunch, he's the one that makes the deal on the behalf of El General Mapache, which means raccoon in Spanish. He goes down to pay off the Wild Bunch for the guns that they're going to sell to the general. So in that role, he's great because they have a plan where they're just going to murder him and they're going to keep the gold and the guns. Of course, they don't get to because the Wild Bunch are really smart. So they've hidden people around and they're ready for this kind of betrayal. And Alfonso Rao comes in and he's like, okay, we give you the gold, you give us the guns. All right, that's the way we're going to do it. He sounds exactly like the famous "We don't need no stinking badges" guy in Treasure of Sierra Madre, except even more kind of extra like that. And he has quite a few scenes in the film. He steals every scene. But so I brought this copy down there and he kind of did his meet and greet and stuff. And I just thought, oh, I'm not going to get into a big thing with him because it was kind of old school. A lot of people hadn't seen him in years that he knew from the Mexican film industry. And I guess he had maybe friends in El Paso, possibly also. So I just waited till that whole thing was over. And then I just thought, okay, I'm going to go into fanboy mode here and try to just kind of take a deep breath. And he was obviously a super cool, amiable guy. And just walked up to him and I pulled this out of my bag and I said, Mr. Arau, I've been, a fan of yours for a long time. I love like Water for Chocolate. It's great. I think I even actually read the book because I like the film so much. And I think his wife wrote the book. But I pulled out the Wild Bunch and I just said, you know what this is, right? He just started laughing. He goes, I know what that is. I know what that is. And I just said, I didn't even ask him for an autograph. I just said, I'd really be just honored if you would write down your favorite line that you had in the film. Um, would you mind doing that for me? And he said, oh, I'd be delighted to do it. I gave it to him. I didn't prompt him or anything. He just had a Sharpie ready to go, which was awesome. And he handed it back to me. And this is what it says on it. It says, this was his favorite line in the film. It says, damn gringos, you're too smart. So that's cool. It says to Mark Alfonso Arau, 2002. So I'm pleased that he wrote that line on there because that's one of my favorite lines also, and it's his favorite line. So this is really cool. And just on a minor side note about him, I was looking him up and I realized that he is still with us and he is 94 years old. So that is super cool. Whatever he's doing right. Mr. Arau, if you're out there, um, happy birthday to you. Live longer, even. And I hope you're doing good. And thank you so much for this. This was and still is special. And that is it for the 1960s. I ended with my favorite movie that I actually got an autograph from a cast member from. So that's very cool. And thank you guys for being here. Appreciate all of you. And I know this was a little long. This might have been the longest one yet, but Next week, we will start with the 70s, and I think I'm going to make a plan now and say there may be even like 4 episodes for the 70s. So thank all you guys for being here. Please remember to like and support the channel. If you can remember to do that, go over and check out my Patreon page. Um, I am writing about my album collection there. I'm doing new unseen things over there also that are exclusive to that. And you can buy me a coffee. Anybody who wants to get in touch with me for a consultation on any kind of music, if you're interested in a producer or just getting advice about your project, I'd love to help you, or guitar playing or bass playing, I can do that too. Um, and remember to check out the honky video that I just put up. It's got a link to some art that Jennifer made especially for it. And you get to hear about the behind the scenes shenanigans and some of the production techniques that went on with my friend Joe Barisi during the making of that. And is there anything else, Mrs.? Is that it? Okay, I think we're there. We're at the end. So thank you guys once again, and great to see you. Cool to spend the afternoon with you guys also. And take care. Love. See ya.